All right. So this next topic I think is really interesting. So it's about weather control. So one thing that it's been an idea for, I mean, even thousands of years, the idea that, gods can control the weather, or that we could control the weather. But the research itself has only started, at least in the United States, until around the 1940s, so
Hmm.
shortly after World War II. We were,
Can-
yeah, 19. So there was a project that was designed to see if we could affect hurricanes and specifically go in and change so the project was, so it was 1947. They said they tried to put a seeding of the hurricane to see, and then they said the hurricane went wacky. There were some issues with that.
Project Cirrus. It was called Project Cirrus. Yeah,
Project
that one
Cirrus.
right there. Yeah.
Yep. Project Cirrus, right? And then you had Project Storm Fury, right? So Project Cirrus was 1947. They tried to say, hey, we are trying to seed this hurricane to see if we can affect it, maybe potentially weaken it. And the problem is that when they first did Project Cirrus, then went into and they did a couple of tests, and they said that the hurricane had been altered, and then it made landfall in Savannah, Georgia, and it's made a big destruction. So they canceled the project after that because they said, oh well, maybe we moved it, when in fact it was probably just it moved on its own. But the idea of being able to basically stop these really horrible hurricanes and tornadoes, it's something that's existed now since the 40s and is now even still being developed today. Project Storm Fury was created by the United States government from 62 to 83. And in that project, they were very specifically trying to see if they could do, cloud seeding again, but on, to see if they could have structural changes, right, from those seeded hurricanes. So what they found was that it did reduce it 20 to 30%. But then as they did more and more projects, they realized that it actually was probably just the hurricane itself. And there are some scientists today who even say that we will never, ever be able to affect the weather of a hurricane, right? Because basically it has the force of multiple nuclear bombs. So the idea that we will be able to go in and actually have that is hubris, right? Human hubris, that we will be able to affect a hurricane and weaken it or move it or stop it completely. There's a lot of ideas, you can hit it with lasers, right? It's kind of the new thing now is, well, maybe you can hit it with lasers and be able to disrupt it in some way. But the fact is there are so many ideas, but very little actual research being done in this space. But like we mentioned in our last session, because we were talking about climate change, and it's a theme that comes up a lot in this podcast, is there's a lot of things out there that we would love to be able to do, but we can't. But it's only going to increase, like weather issues are only going to increase in the world. So what are your thoughts on all of this, right? I know you were reading some of these articles as well.
Yeah. Okay. So one, when you brought this up, I was, well, where's our tinfoil hats? You know what I mean? There's the chemtrails and the government's creating the hurricane and it's changing and all this sort of stuff. So that was when you first brought up the topic. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to start diving into Reddit and Discord forums and stuff like that and going all over the place, and I really hadn't, I kind of knew. You hear of for instance, like Dubai did this where they seeded clouds and they created this flooded atmosphere. I should have pulled up that video. Maybe we could put it up whenever we post it. But there was that sort of work. And there's actually a lot of different technologies that could potentially either aid in precipitation, reduce the, sort of the greenhouse gas effect that we have going on, reflecting sunlight. So here's just a couple. I've got this summary. We've got, of course, the cloud seeding. That's what we've already been talking about there with Storm Fury there. Marine cloud brightening, stratospheric aerosol injections.
Yes.
Broad solar radiation modification, artificial upwelling, which is like using ocean water, like cool ocean water, and influencing sort of the initial sort of airland. Ocean fertilization, which helps with biological creation and aids in potential cooling services. The cloud thinning, that we talked about. Directed energy, where there's electromagnetic pulses that we're going to throw in the atmosphere. And then, of course, potentially weaponization as well, right? And of course, that's some of the things we've talked about. So as you noted, it is very difficult to change the trajectory of things like tornadoes and or hurricanes. And that's what they found out, is that you could do whatever, but how a hurricane works. And I saw a really great video on this, was that the hurricane's constantly changing anyway. There's a new eye every 4 hours or 72 hours anyway, because of just the evolution of and we know this, sometimes hurricanes dissipate, sometimes they grow stronger, and it's essentially the centrifugal force. So our little stuff that we throw in it, like a plane, a bomb, an explosion, it may impact it, but only in the short term. So, really, I think that's not the technology that we may be leaning on. But I think what's really interesting is that when we talk about climate change, we can actually use some of this stuff to help and aid. And by the way, this is already happening. This is not a need for tinfoil hats. There is a company called Rainmaker that is working right now with the U.S. government in multiple states to help produce rain and rain clouds. And here's what's really interesting about this. I listened to him do a talk, and there was an interesting part about this company. Feel free to look at them and take a look at their work. One thing he did note on this podcast I was listening to, the CEO, was that how they formulate the cloud seeding is that there is this specific chemical. It's in the trillions. So it has way less than aspirin in terms of the ability to ingest and cause harm to, the human. So that was really a direct idea. And the other thing too is that, well, what's the reason? Why would we want to do this anyway? Right? What are we trying to seed? Well, similar like Dubai or maybe some of these other areas, when we run into these climate change issues where the southern half of the United States is going to be a desert. Maybe we don't want a desert. Maybe we want a green area. And so that was his idea, and that's what's frankly being propagated, is what if we didn't have to worry about the Colorado River drying up and leading to no water in Arizona and New Mexico and California? What if the grasslands of Kansas made their way all the way to Arizona and California, so we could have a more vibrant space for farmland and for just good, healthy earth? There's a technology that's out there, and it doesn't have to be nefarious. And of course, we can use it properly. We can ensure it doesn't harm humans, and we could maybe possibly help ourselves through the technology capabilities to aid against the troubling climate change that is coming due to either anthropogenic or just how our Earth is just maturing and whatnot. So, frankly, this is not conspiracy. This is real. It's happening in the United States. It's happening globally. And I think we just need to pay attention to it, make sure it's regulated properly, make sure we're doing the right tests and whatnot. But to me, if it's a way for us to technology our way out of climate change issues, I'm all for it.
Well, and you hit it on the head. There are some areas, right, that we're exploring. One of the coolest concepts that I've seen, again, it's conceptual because it's something that we can't build yet, is basically creating some sort of sun shield in space. And what that sun shield could do is block out the sun for that very specific area where the hurricane is building, right? Because it needs the cold air and the warm air, right? So it's kind of like, matching the, and so if you were able to make it really cold, then potentially you could disrupt the hurricane. And so instead of something like, trying to do it, affecting miles wide on Earth, space, I think, is probably the best way to look at this. And yeah, right there, building some sort of solar shield that would block out that part of the Earth and stop it from like forming, and maybe not necessarily killing it altogether, but potentially being able to disrupt it, make it weaker, something like that. And if you can make it even slightly weaker, right? That's what the government was originally trying to do, was 20-30% weaker. You can make it even slightly weaker. That's lives saved, less property damage. Katrina never would have been as powerful as it was, right, in New Orleans if it wasn't category 5. Right? The idea is that if you can make it so much less, the levees would never have broken. Things like that. So that's not in the realm of, outside of the realm of possibility. We're talking about building these large structures in space right now. Will it be done in our lifetimes? Probably not. But if it's something that could be done, it's something worth trying, because, our climate is only going to get worse. And, there's a lot of movies out there. There's a movie out there predicts, what if the satellites that were controlling the Earth's weather, I think it was a thriller movie where all of these bad weather events happened because the satellite system failed. But that's actually something that's in the realm of possibility, building something in space to build effect. They're even talking about doing that for climate change because it's getting hotter on Earth. What if we could blot out the sun somewhat and then make it cooler? So those are the things that are within the realm of possibility that lots of scientists are still thinking about. Is it being, even scale models being built? No. But I think that that's something, the cost aside, maybe in the future, it will be a lot less expensive to do. And I could see it being done maybe in our children's or grandchildren's lifetime.
Absolutely. And, the other part about this is that We're not even just talking about possibly, rainmaking, like Rainmaker, the company, but also, like you said, protecting certain areas that are getting too much. Like, for instance, the polar ice caps. Polar ice caps melt. We have huge sea level rise. We're going to lose cities. And there couldn't be micro weather targeting. You could see also too, like with the poor effects of certain types of, the greenhouse gas emissions. There might be a way to actually modify certain parts of the atmosphere to help dissipate some of this sort of, potential bad things happening in the atmosphere. I think we do also need to dispel some. This is a very conspiracy laden topic. There are these areas like Operation Popeye, which was in Vietnam, where they were doing cloud seeding to create rain. Again, these technologies have existed and been tried for a very long time and have been executed. And frankly, they haven't been very good. They weren't great, right? And it didn't really produce what it needed. And of course, we don't have the ability to actually affect a hurricane. Some folks thought we would have affected Hurricane Helene, right, when it hit, of course, the Carolinas and devastated those areas. So we don't have an ability to do this sort of work. And even actually, when we look at it in the HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, what I think is another sort of, oh, geez, they're controlling the weather, they're going to dissipate anything. Just so everybody knows, HAARP actually has to do with the ionosphere. So the ionosphere is actually geo waves. It's like another, 1,000, 10,000, above the troposphere, which is actually where all the weather is at. So HAARP can't even do anything having to do with the weather. So just so that's not necessarily happening now. Now, again, when we have things like these rainmakers, and we are going to, whether it is Dubai or whether it's another, like the country that wants to create some sort of rain or clouds or something along those lines, yes, we should have a regulatory environment around it. We can't just have fly-by-night people going up there and seeding irregularly. There should be regular, chances to actually see what's happening at the ground level as we use this sort of stuff. Just like anything else, poor execution of technology leads to sometimes human decay, loss, pollution, and all the rest.